Om mano na buddhi sharira tanmatram Indriyani bhutani na bhuta panchakam. Aham kritas Vyatswarupakam Tamisham Atmanam Upiti Shashvatam. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Everything is just a projection of the mind. Therefore, those who want to realize Brahman dissolve the mind, the intellect, the gross and subtle senses, the gross and subtle elements, along with the ego, into the great self, the Atman, the indivisible self within mankind. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karvo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, and with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And now we continue on with the second class in a class of 3 about the secret of self-storage, which has got a humorous side to it. As you drive down the freeway and see these self-storage places, you should probably be thinking of not just physical things that you store in them, but how the mind has rather got all of these seeds for all of those physical things within it. As we looked at last week with the Mr. Pumpkinhead chart here, we might as well all be walking around with watermelons on our shoulders because of all the seeds within them, and those seeds' potential for more and more watermelons means more and more worlds, more and more objects, more and more lifetimes in cycles. And we also looked at some of the riot act that Advaita Vedanta reads against Maya, as we were speaking about just before live stream audience joined us from different parts of the world. We know you're looking in from places from Europe and India and East Coast, West Coast. We welcome you into this Dharma atmosphere and hope you are also connecting from last week. We keep this once a week Dharma transmission of about 3 hours a day going, and so that our minds are refreshed as to the nature of seated samadhi. That is, this experiences we're having as refined human beings, if our consciousness is awake. Shakti Digrata, have to bring the Shakti power, the Devatma Shakti, out of all these objects and out of all these thoughts and activities of our life, and place her at the forefront of everything so that she guides and protects us eternally. Those chants are there in the tradition. So coming to deal with the mind is one of the main parts of spiritual life that we must take up. So that's why we showed this chart, and I created it 2 weeks ago for this class series about the mind-only schools, and how if mind is no mind, or mind is dissolved mind, or mind is pure mind, Those are three different expressions from three different great souls, Patanjali and Lord Buddha and Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. If we reach that kind of mind, then these seeds are inactive. Then it's a matter of whether or not we will allow them to germinate again, to enter into this world with a brain and body, mind, a psychophysical being, we call it in Vedanta, and experience this again in relativity, or what India would call Maya, that four-letter word, Maya. And we know that people under the influence of Maya act very different than who they truly are. There's the eternal soul, which is perfect, intrinsically aware, conscious, yet they come into life and body and fall off of that ideal and have a difficult time keeping up the standard in the influence of the world and its vagaries and vicissitudes and its the relatives and the ancestors and the celestial influence and even influence of the devas and devis, the shining ones, the gods. But if this is difficult for you to believe in or to accept, if you're an intellectual person or a scientifically minded person or an agnostic or atheist, then you have to give it some time and think about it and maybe open up to the possibility that all of these things exist within you. That grand statement that Jesus made about the kingdom of heaven within you is very apropos to us in this day and age, if we have been raised in the Christian ethic and the Christian morality, Christian dynamic. Even if we haven't joined it and we prefer other paths, which is fine and good, to understand the original teachings of that great prophet and great rabbi, Jesus, we would bend our minds towards understanding the statement of the kingdom of heaven is within you, and follow it up by thinking of other great souls in different nations and different religious traditions who also brought out that idea that everything is stored within you. And in that way, then, it becomes much more easy to have faith in or believe in or entertain these many worlds that are talked about, but of course which obviously are not outside of us. There are representations of all of that outside of us. Objects are just thought made concretized, Sri Sharda Devi said. So if we think about that our thoughts provide the sentiency or the intelligence in order to bring the five elements together in a physical universe to congeal them, then the congealing power and the dissolving power become all of a sudden available to us. The mind can project things. We would pause here and take exception to the word creation, because as we learned last week, everything is acreate, see? And creation would be a misnomer because you can't get something out of nothing. So you're bringing everything into something, its somethingness, via these seeds inside of your mind. And they go back many lifetimes, and they go back many deep levels inside into your interior being, into these worlds and into your thought process, which has as its triple denomination the gross, the subtle, and the causal, and also what belongs to the transcendental called Turiya, the fourth state. So your gross body and so forth, and your outer elements and so forth form one body, and that's what most people are exploring, but unconscious of the fact that it all was projected from your inner body, that is your mind. And then that mind, when it's freed from the desire to project, has a causal substratum that is all seeds unwatered. It would be like your deep sleep tonight. Swapna and sushupti come to forth as teachings there. So you have these three levels of your consciousness, and if you entertain these as ideal and eternal philosophical axioms that have been proven and brought out from great thinkers and great meditators, those who have realized God, then all of a sudden it gives you this idea that you're at the fulcrum of this projecting and dissolving power. You replace creation, preservation, and destruction with the words projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. And as we looked at last week, the chart on the ancient chest of consciousness, if you remember, she was saying that at the beginning of a cycle of creation, all of this gets projected forth, and then it gets sustained for a while, and then it gets withdrawn at the time of pralaya. And so I myself, at the time of pralaya, withdraw from everything that's made of thought, energy, and matter, and abide in Brahman, this transcendent turiya, they call it, the fourth state of awareness. So all of those teachings are there for us to consider, but we're considering them from the standpoint of a mind that has seeds and desires in it. We also know that, as we'll look at hopefully today, some beings take those seeds and refine them immensely. That is, they'll turn everything dharmic, they'll purify everything, they'll sublimate everything, they'll refine everything as they act in the world, in the body, and the mind becomes purer and purer as it does. Pure mind. From the pure mind you'll get real happiness. And if you don't have pure mind, happiness will never come. So that's what we see in them, in these great souls, is that they're happy, content, peaceful, and blissful even. And when we see that in our teachers, called gurus or acharyas or spiritual preceptors or dharma instructors, then we begin to take on that ambiance that they have, and we want to emulate it. We want to keep our torches lit as they are doing, seemingly so effortlessly in life, amongst the struggles. So that's balance, that's yoga, that's equilibrium. And so those words are very important. You can't just think of yoga as some hatha yoga exercises and some pranayama, because Shankara says you'll never get enlightenment from those. My teacher used to say the Westerners are very much into pranayama, for instance, as one of the exercises. But he says you'll never get enlightenment from breath control, you get enlightenment from sense control. So if you can withdraw the senses from their objects, then that's going to be self-control. And once you have your ego self under control, then you can have this bliss of the great self. So it's taught in various ways in many of the different darshanas and lineages and sampradayas and cults of India that are attached to India's eternal Sanatana Dharma. Very, very ancient, in fact timeless. You could say we could have a sort of philosophy wars, you see, and see which culture goes back the furthest and what's the cradle of civilization and all that. But everything gets blown out of the water when you think of the timelessness of India's Sanatana Dharma. How whenever it comes forward, it's always reflecting this non-dual truth. It's God itself attached to the thread that goes through the pearls. And when it identified with that thread, then it knew all the pearls, and it didn't come from the outside in. It started from the inside and then came out, and finally went behind everything and beyond inside and outside, completely to the transcendental source. So that you'll find reflected in its revealed scriptures, that which are dozens and dozens of them, that you'll find emanating out of its illumined souls, which are hundreds and hundreds of them, not just one prophet and one scripture, but dozens and hundreds of each. And despite the detriments and problems of the day, that is today's time, we'll still find echoing deep and not too far below the surface these great truths of Advaita Vedanta, one of them coming from inspecting the mind. And seeing, as we said last week, that the mind is the architect of the universe. One great scientist said that at the turn of the century, last century, and found out that, to paraphrase him, we've been looking at the universe, and we see now that it looks more like a thought than like a machine. And we ought to hail the mind as the sovereign of the universe, not just a participant in it after it forms, but actually the originator of it. So if even Western savants are beginning to say this and realize this, mainly due to having heard the Upanishads, and the Vedas, and the Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures in which the great seers talk about these truths, then we know that something's afoot. We know that the game of Maya is always afoot, and we have to become detectors, like Sherlock Holmes was, of all the little incidents and all the little details that point us to this mind-only school solution. Because if we think that there's no cause to the universe but matter, and of course we're going to follow the evolutionary theory, and then we feel like we've evolved from animals. But this is why I put this on this chart. I showed it to you last week, and I went back and made a few corrections to it because it was so new. That is, and I also made one addition to it. And so let me read out some of these as a reminder to pick up the trail. So Sherlock Holmes is on the trail. So the game's afoot. Let's pick up the trail and just repeat some of these great Advaitic axioms so we can see how these great seers of India thought and still think today. My teacher, I was transcribing a lecture of his the other day and came across a part in it that he was saying where he met Ramana Maharshi. So he was actually describing his meeting with Ramana Maharshi, this great contemporary seer. And he said Ramana Maharshi wasn't a part of our order. He meant the Ramakrishna order, but he loved the Ramakrishna order very much. And he said he went there to see him with his own eyes, and he was an Advaitist. And since he was down there in Bangalore area and so forth, he brought him mangoes. And so Ramana Maharshi took these mangoes with his own hands and cleaned them and cut them and then distributed them to the people and then took some himself. So Swami Shishananda was very pleased about that, to see this great soul, who was at that time, of course, an elder to him, eating this prasad fruit, making it into prasad and distributing it and taking some himself. So we have great souls like Ramana Maharshi who are very contemporary on the scene as compared to, say, Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. So these Advaitins are still coming in this day and age. That's very, very heartening and very, very inspiring to know that even as my neighbors and friends were telling me yesterday, the world has gone insane. Look who's running it, for instance, and so forth. So, I mean, I know very little about politics. It's not my arena, but I do know that these great souls are still appearing here. So there must be something worthwhile to come back for. It's, not so much to save souls, because souls are already saved. They just have to realize that they're souls. They realize that the kingdoms of heaven reside within them. And so one of the connections to make for that will be that your mind is the architect of the universe, especially when you couple it with the mind of your ancestors, the mind of the celestials, the minds of the gods and goddesses, devas and devis, and finally the cosmic mind of the Trinity. That's a lot of mind power. And this is all going involution style, not evolution style. As I was just saying, we didn't come out of animals. Animals came out of us as ideas. Everything came out of us as ideas. So if you can make this one shift of consciousness, or even entertain that as a Westerner, then you might get over your preoccupation with matter and insentiency and realize the eternal and infinite nature of your own soul. That is, soul with a capital S, we call Atman. So some of these great sayings here to pick us up on the trail. God does not create worlds. The mind does that in its individual, collective, and cosmic forms via its innate powers of cosmic projection. Sankalpa. We don't have really a word for that in English that points straight to the philosophy. We could say projection, but now we're thinking about some sort of Western psychology where you're projecting something on something else as a sort of emotional fault. But when they say cosmic projection, they mean this came out of the Trinity. The original mind projected all these worlds, which is specifically why you're going to have to find the Mahashakti underlying everything and bring her out. And then you'll find the progenitress of all of this, and she will open the way for you. And again it says, God does not bless or curse anyone or anything. The law of karma brings about just fruits accordingly. That is all. So when you see cause and effect happening, you know that's coming from people's own actions. Those actions originate in the mind. That mind has seeds. And so the projecting, sustaining, and dissolving power is all within you, which is, by the way, one of the main reasons why you meditate, so that you realize that all of this has been brought forward by you. You're sustaining it, and then you can also withdraw it, which is why I chanted Mano Buddhi Nabudhi Tanmatram Indriyam Bhutani Nabhuta Panchakam at the beginning. Aham Kritas Chapi Vyat Sarupakam means that the one who wants to know Brahman withdraws mano, mind, buddhi, intellect, indriya, the senses, tanmatras, the subtle elements, bhutani, the 5 elements, and bhuta panchakam, all into Brahman. So this is the mind that's doing this, the powerful mind who has knowledge of the fact that it's all been projected, sustained, and withdrawn. That's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva there. Do we have to sing it? Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaram, the great Guru Stotram. So if you have this Lord Brahma in you, and he's helping you project things along with your ancestors and this great mind, then it gets all projected, then you have it sustained. So everyone loves the Vishnu aspect of that. Oh, let's sustain all of this. Let's do it forever, as long as we can. For as many yugas as we can, let's enjoy it and sustain it and play with it and come back again and again and enjoy it in many lifetimes, till it comes time for the end of a set of yugas called the Kali Yuga, and then Shiva comes forward to dissolve it all. So you also have the dissolver within you that can dissolve all problems, can dissolve all transgressions, that can dissolve all bodies and the seeds for creating bodies in the mind. But who wants to use him? He's Rudra, he's Bhairava, he's frightening, and he undermines everything that has been projected and sustained. Over time, people think that projection turns into creation, and sustenance turns into projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. Creation, preservation, and destruction are really not good words to use. But if you could use projection, sustenance, withdrawal, then it's like the mother says in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, all of that happens without anyone being born, anyone dying. Nothing gets created, nothing gets destroyed. But if you say creation, preservation, and destruction, then you're putting a different moniker on this triple process. And people begin to believe that it's true. Like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the more lifetimes you live in Maya, the more you begin to think the world is real. That's a profound statement in the gospel. What he's saying is the world isn't real, but people are beginning to think it is because they're involved in this idea of creation, preservation, and destruction that's somehow in the hands of Maya or God, but neither one has a finger in it. Maya is unreal and God is transcendental. You have your fingers in it, along with your family and your ancestors and the celestials. This is the mind we're talking about. So India posits the mind-only schools. It's a big pumpkin field with many, many seeds and many, many levels. As long as you're in that, then you're involved in the game of Maya, the dance of Maya, they call it. Next week we can look at that, the difference between a kind of Maya that's called Leela, that is a very benign and harmless, even beneficial kind of projection, and then a very harmful projection, and what the difference of those are, according to Divine Mother. She goes on to say, or that is Advaita Vedanta, which is her, you might say, her pet philosophy, God does not heal or cause disease. All illnesses, their causes, and their cures rest in the mind, with the individual ego. God is not responsible for floods, famine, or pestilence. Such catastrophes are caused by nature, the 5 elements, weather, etc., all whose causes are to be found in the mind. So we say earth, fire, air, wind, ether, all that. These can be the staging grounds for a lot of catastrophes. But all of the gods of those, the god of fire, Agni, the god of wind, Vayu, and so forth, those all exist in your mind. And many minds have that existing in them. So the weather is really up to them. Why else do you think people can divine the weather or change the weather if they go after occult powers, which is not advisable? But all these so-called gods are in them, and that's what's causing changes in the world. Changelessness, my teacher used to say. Whenever he used that word, he'd stop and go, changelessness. Put a space between each one of the syllables. Why isn't anyone finding the truth that everything is immutable when it appears to be mutable? He used to say, so the ocean has peaceful depths, but on the surface the waves are roiling. So he said, if you want to be tossed about, stay at the surface. But if you want peace, 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 dive deep, deep into the ocean of God's beauty, where there are no waves. That's changelessness there. God, Brahman, the Absolute, cannot be prayed to, as it is not an individual, but rather the cohesive whole. God with form cannot be supplicated. God with form can be supplicated. We want to say that. But that God abides in the mind as do heavens and lokas. So if you're praying to someone, probably that Devatma Shakti that you want to bring out from hiding, the divine energy and everything, which people intuit but never make acquaintance with, has to be brought out in meditation. So te dhyan yoga nugata pasyan devatma shaktim svagunayar nagudim is what the Svetasvatara Upanishad says about that. I mean, svagunayar nagudim means she's veiled by the gunas. What are the gunas? Slothfulness, restlessness, and balance. And that's why nobody can find, because the mind's shifting back and forth between those veils, putting on one veil of laziness 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week or 1 lifetime, then all of a sudden shifting to a restless veil, living with that for a while, then all of a sudden getting some balance, which means pleasure, and then going back to tamas again, slothfulness. So she's hidden behind that play. So then she was imperceptible to their intellects, the Upanishad says. So what did they do? Te dhyan yoga. They practiced the yoga of meditation and cut time down in a way. And when they did that, they saw the Devatma Shakti shining, one and indivisible. So this is the benefit of dhyan yoga. We now have a new issue of Nectar, which is about to come out. This is all about meditation, all the articles in it. And this 33, issue number 33, is about meditation. And how to cut time down, and how to bring the Devatma Shakti from hiding and place her at the center of your life. So this will be out. This is March. Beware the Ides of March. Luckily they've passed, so now we'll be able to put this out very soon for people to read these beautiful articles. 3 swamis, a rabbi, a couple dharma teachers, and other people have contributed to this issue. So this is why Swami Vivekananda has come to the West, and to this world in this recent lifetime, is to bring these great teachings. I mean, if we wanted to, we could just cut to the chase and sing to him about it. Swadharma Shrestitam
Sagarvam samshatam jananadrishtata tvavayo bhajyaho swadharmo vaidiko yadardo darshita viveka nandate prabhate pranjalihi. Narendra Shashave, Narendra Yovane, Narendra Kridane, Narendra Shikshane, Narendra Palane, Narendra Yarpane, Viveka Nandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi. Which translates into English as the eternal verities contained within the Vedic religion, that is, these great axioms of Advaita Vedanta, were revealed and explained lucidly by you, O Vivekananda, the great teacher. This humbled the pride of those who erroneously proclaimed their own creeds to be supreme to others. By silencing these assumptions, you have opened all minds to non-dual truth and drawn attention to a truly universal faith. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our humble salutations. And goes on to sing, Vimoksham svatvanas chaturyogadvabihi Pritagva samhatayar hitam lokasya cha tavagya sadayediti prichanaraha vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi Narendra Shashave Narendra Yovane Narendra Kridane, Narendra Shikshane, Narendra Palane, Narendra Yarpane, Viveka Nandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi, Viveka Nandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi. Which further goes on to say in this beautiful stotram, O Vivekananda, your message, transmitted from the platform of non-duality, is for the realization of the soul and the good of the world. Atmano moksharta jagadhataya cha. That's the motto of the Ramakrishna order. By reinterpreting and coalescing the four yogas, and making them accessible and understandable to humanity, you have destroyed the foundation of ignorance in this age and ushered in a new era. So this is what we think of when we think of Swami Vivekananda's advent here on earth. And we celebrated his 150th centenary a year or two ago to bring about the import of his descent into humanity, into this world of name and form. Living in a state that Maya couldn't enter. They used to say that he was like a sun that was always shining. Darkness couldn't get near. So that's how we need to be. We need to shine with that original truth that comes from the Vedas and the Upanishads, that come from Mother India. So don't pray to God. Keep God pure, sacrosanct, non-dual, as your very nature, beyond name and form, beyond prayer and pray-y. If you have to pray, then pray to the Divine Mother Shakti and bring her out of hiding. She'll guide you to the formless Brahman. You get to the Father through the daughter, in our tradition, through the mother. God and the soul, Atman, are non-different. Thus the soul cannot be created, neither from dust by the gods, or even by the mind. God, soul, self are identical, undivided, and acreate. That's the word Swamiji coined when he was here. Acreate. He's tired of hearing the word creation. Projection would have been better, because that's more how the mind does things. Projection withdraws, just like waking and deep sleep. It's there when you're awake, it's gone when you're in deep sleep. So how to account for that? Good and evil are in the human mind, not in God. God does not take sides in war, nor does God fashion a devil and fight evil. The human mind causes all such folly, while God remains transcendent, always and ever abiding in eternal peace. So take your vision or your ideation of God and posit it there at the highest level, abiding in eternal peace, then raise yourself to that. Vivekananda used to say, never pull God down to your comfort zones. Always raise yourself up to that, capital T. God, who is eternal life, does not take part in life in bodies. Neither in heaven, on earth, or in hell. God does not cause death either. These apparent assumptions and movements are dreams in the collective mind. God does not dream. A beautiful teaching Swamiji used to say, it's all a matter of a dream, you see. Row, row, row your boat, life is but a dream. But then what's beyond the dream? O dreamer, awake, you must, is a beautiful song. Awaken from all dreams, then you'll find your true nature. And that's why they call God ever awake. Yogic insomnia. It doesn't dream. Dreams are all in Maya. So Vivekananda would follow it up saying, you're never in Maya. Maya is in you. So get rid of it. He had. It was like a sun with no darkness. So he had caused Maya somehow to take to its heels. And in his brief 39 years, lived in a life of God realization. Right in front of us, even here in the West. Penultimate, here's one. Time, space, and cause and effect, karma, operate within the mind when it is present. They do not function in the Brahman state. Therefore, events in time, objects in space, and the happiness and suffering of cause and effect are not present in Brahman. That's called Ananda, that's called Samadhi, that's called Satori, that's called Nirvana, that's called Asampragyata. It's called non-duality, Nirvikalpa. There are names in all the traditions of India, that is the different lineages, for this unseated, non-dual state of awareness that hundreds and thousands of beings have realized and merged into. Why are we so afraid here in the West to even approach ideas like this? Through our own direct experience, we should have these experiences that prove relative theories wrong. If not outright wrong, to give them some credence steps towards working our way inside. But it must be inside. Can't be like along an evolutionary trajectory where the idea of time as a linear precept, which is a gift of St. Augustine, leads us, you see. St. Paul, the second founder of Christ, and then St. Augustine. From them we've got the idea of original sin, and we've got the idea of the idea that time is linear and is true. So these are not non-dual axioms. They never were and never were accepted, except on a relative level. That is, evolution happens on the physical level with matter. But you're not a physical being. You're a mind. Beyond a mind, you're a pure mind. Beyond a pure mind, you're the soul. You're the witness beyond that. And beyond that, there's no difference between Brahman and the soul. Thou art that. I and my Father are one. Put it in any terms you want, but think about it. Be thee perfect. And here's the one I added while I was making these other changes to the chart. Mind, in conjunction with nature, produces all things, inclusive of bodies and worlds. This amounts to projection and withdrawal of concepts and ideas in cycles, rather than production and evolution of real objects with beginnings and endings. Man is not an animal. He is a sentient, eternal soul. He has not evolved from animals. Animals and all other forms are actually projected from his mind. So this will take ideas like seven-day creation theory and the evolutionary theory and put them on their ear. You'll cut straight to the chase, and you'll find out that you are the author. That is, your mind, in conjunction with all other minds, are the author or the composer of this play of life. This play of life can be overcome by love, adoration, and understanding. These three bring us quickly to our goal, the truth of Brahman. But though I hear these words with my ears, they find no echo in my heart. Therefore, I take refuge with thee, O friend of all beings. Written by Swami Vivekananda about his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, the eternal friend of all beings. So this play of life can be overcome by love, adoration, and understanding, non-dual understanding. So I hope you won't mind that I went back and reiterated all this. That's as much as this chart as I'll take up today as its repeat, but in today's class and last week's class you can look back and see how an Advaita Vedantan views all of this play of name and form outside of himself or herself, and how to behold the truth through the maze of mundane human conventions. So it's not what people worship here that we're looking at when we look at something like this. It's the eternal truth as a verity, which is your own true nature, that we take refuge in and try and realize over time. So having reviewed that, then we must look at seeds in the mind and some of the things that must be seen as their causes, like samskaras, we talk about that. Also, we can look at sankalpa itself. So the sankalpa is an idea in your mind that gets projected. Vikalpa too. Vikalpa actually gives it that flavor of desire. That is, why are these seeds in the mind, why are we projecting them? Out of desire, so that we can enjoy worlds. Water as drinks, and land as food, and fire as sunshine on our backs, and so forth. All of these things within us are these principles that we should dissolve into Brahman every day and bring them back in the morning. People are doing this anyway, but the idea here is, oh, guess what? We should be doing it consciously. We should know that we're doing it. Not just to think that karma is doing it, or God is doing it, or the devil is doing it, or my ancestors are doing it. But this has my own stamp on it. See? Each day has the stamp of my own projection power on it. It's called sankalpa. So you can see here when Vashishta gets a hold of the teaching of sankalpa, Lord Vashishta, who was the great teacher of the teenage Sri Ram, who is, of course, the great avatar early on, before Krishna's time even, same being. He puts it in this way, that basically there are three modes of sankalpa. I mean, there are many individual sankalpas going on, but if you want to put it in a cosmic level, all of these groups of souls and minds, the mind-only schools kind of idea, are projecting it how? First, the world, because they have a desire for physical objects. So that's a great impetus in the collective mind. Let's have these physical objects. We have the power to do this. Let's formulate them as worlds and then take bodies. And of course, if you've followed Samkhya Yoga and the quintuplication process, you know the dynamics of how that happens. From basically cosmic mind comes the individual mind, and from that mind comes the senses and the elements, and works its way out from thought into matter via energy. You see, so energy, mind, and or thought and matter are involved in this process, sankalpic process. The Upanishads are quick to say, Brahman is not matter, it's not energy, and it's not thought. It's free of sankalpa. Which, of course, if we go back and look at these Advaitic axioms, we'll be quite certain of that, and what's going on will be then put in our own backyard. Hopefully we'll put it in our front yard and sell it off. Take these seeds and turn them into seeds that will not germinate anymore. So he says, for physical objects, that is, for foods, for sense objects, for pleasures, and for possessions. Our first body is body consciousness. Our first level of consciousness is body and food. Our second level of consciousness has thought and energy, and our third level of consciousness has sleep and pleasure. So that's the three bodies. It's also the three worlds, Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. Can also represent A, U, and M, the great word, with those. So here is another Triputi teaching that goes in line with it, only flavored by the Sanskrit teaching of Sankalpa. So that is the first world that gets projected, that is the last world that gets projected, but it comes first in this list. Second, he wants us to move back inside and know that the physical world came out of our mind. So that's the desire for mental projection. So you see these seeds in deep sleep and you say to yourself, as it were, what will happen if I water those? So if you could see inside each of the seeds, maybe you would not water some and you might water others. That's what the great avatars and seers and saints and sages and luminaries and Jivanmuktas and so forth, they will do that. They'll examine those seeds. Which ones do I want to water in this lifetime in order to come into the body free of desires and free of karma? My teacher's name was that. Pretty much in English means having no residue at the end. Well, that is, he would burn all the seeds and there would be no residue coming out of those, no karma to bring him back to earth again. It was his last lifetime as a monk. You see. So that is a choice for the soul. But it would be brought into the realm of possibility for you if you knew the dynamics of sankalpa and vikalpa. So what does this desire for mental projection contain? They want worlds, they want heavens, and excitements and distractions in those. Somebody asked me last week for a description on the problems of the world over the last few hundred years. So I said, okay, Sri Ramakrishna said in the mid-1800s, the problem of the world today is worldliness. That is, as Buddha would say, the rest of households is non-self-effort. So there's no self-effort going on spiritually. And that was even in India at the time. So what to speak of the West, which has no relationship whatsoever with sadhana or spiritual self-effort. It's all about the grace of the Savior in the church. That's how it takes the place of the Guru. The Guru needs to be there in order to connect to the Savior and the Avatar. So these distractions back then were worldliness. But I heard Jamgon Khandro Rinpoche say in the 1980s when I was with him on Maui, the Hawaiian Islands here, that the great problem of today now was distraction. He said these teachings, he was teaching the Mahamudra, he said these teachings of the Mahamudra, which its very first premise starts on the worlds are projections of the mind. That's the first rule of the Mahamudra. All of this came from the mind. So Tibet has gotten on that mind-only school rag too, you see. So the Mahamudra teaching is one of the most precious teachings in Tibetan Buddhism. How does it start out? All of this is projected by the radiant mind. That's the first thing you have to affirm to yourself. So distraction then is taking us away from those truths. But now what's today? What would be the great problem today? So that's a good question. It would be a great problem today. If it was worldliness back then and distraction, then I would say, if I could add my own little voice into those two great voices, apathy. You just don't care about God, about religion, about self-effort, about enlightenment, about
anything that's good for you. It's all about projection of worlds to have enjoyment. And then you suffer, and you don't put the two together. You see, that if you project something, it's going to get destroyed. That is, if you're attached to it as creation, then it's going to get destroyed, and you'll be dragged from birth to death and death to birth. This thirst for life forever quench, it drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. That means the transmigrating soul that projects. So those are words by Vivekananda too. So distractions were definitely a part of that teaching. There's a third level of sankalpa there that comes from the intellect. Remember we had back here this teaching that mind is fourfold, manas, which projects dualities, and then chitta, which is your thoughts, that holds seeds for desires, and then ahamkara, your ego, and then intelligence, which makes it all occur. The ego is along for the ride. It's like a big fourfold chariot, the mind. So if that's the case, and that's the nature of the dual mind, then you have this problem of the intellect being attuned only to the ego instead of to the great self. Now, if the intellect gets attuned to the great self, all of a sudden the wisdom particles in it get charged up. That's how I would put it. Jnana, matra, gets charged up. That's the same as saying Shakti Jagrata, that is mother hidden in everything. That's the intelligent power hidden in everything. You bring her out, she'll make everything have meaning to you. The chair, your work, your boredom will even have meaning. Everything all of a sudden lives, and you're one-to-one with it. There's nothing in the way that's veiling or distorting. The veiling and distorting powers have been removed, and now there's only the revelatory power there. So the intellect, if it gets aligned with the great self, is an entirely different animal than if it gets aligned with the small self, the ego, because then it wants to create scientific accomplishments for power of destruction and for pleasure. What is our science for today? It's for power of destruction or for enjoyment of objects, inventions. That's where science has gone. It's where it's going. It's where it's been and where it'll end up, unless it puts its powers at the beck and call of the pure ego, of refined ego, of sadhana, of practice, of God realization, of renunciation of worlds rather than playing with matter. Got the tiger by the tail there. And it's headed towards destruction of the universe, involution. And it has no evolution, it has no involution with it. See, that's something that's very unjust about science and its evolution theory, is that it has no involution attached to it. At least in India, if you had an evolution, you had an involution to go back to. Remember the iceberg chart last week? I showed you how the bulk and the tip are connected, and how everything's going around, melting and reforming and so forth, all under this sun of non-dual knowledge. But that aside for now, God forbid, you find this cycle going on all the time. And that's just repetition of matter that's coming from mind. So the intellect, what does it have in store in the sankalpic vein? Desire for attainments. What kind of attainments? Power, manipulation, pride, and glory. Good word for that in Tantra is vainglory. It's a nice word, vainglory. It's all glory for the vanity of attainments, to say that I did this and I have this power, I can manipulate matter this way, and I can manipulate people because I can manipulate matter. So therefore I have this intellectual attainment, and it fires and fuels my desire for more. Not for less, Nobody thinks of I want less. See? Or maybe I just want my pure self, which has everything in it, but no detrimental seeds. So sankalpa then could be called here hope, brooding, seeking, owning, coveting, enjoying, striving for, accumulating, clinging to, non-sharing, taking the unreal as real, conceiving, thinking, imagining, creating, projecting, and fantasizing about. There are all some words. Some of you might look through there and say, oh, well, I like creation. You say, yeah, well, I want to teach my children to be creative. But when my teacher heard that, he said, in a materialistic society, you should never teach your children to be creative. You should teach them to be disciplined. You get them on the hub of creation here in a materialistic society, look where it's headed. They want to become millionaires, want to invent this and that. It's all a matter of sankalpa. If you teach them to be disciplined, they'll stand back and renounce the world. They'll see where it's going ahead of time. So in a materialistic society, creativity is not a very good thing to teach your children. You want them to be disciplined. You want them to be able to renounce things that are unreal and not have the wool pulled over their eyes again and again, over lifetime after lifetime, by the desires of the ancestors for heavens, earths, hells, hopes, fears, and so forth that accompany them. So, how to deal with all this? Vasishtha has several different ways in which he'll deal with it. However, the best one he calls asamvedana. It's a nice Sanskrit word. It really means non-receptivity. It's the best English word I could find for the solution to this sankalpic process. Is non-receptivity. It's sort of like being transparent, you might say. So you become just like, say, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, and Holy Mother said it too, smoke stains a window, but it runs right through a screen. So you want to be more like the screen in this case, that all desires that come to you, desires for all of these things, you become like a screen and just let it pass. And so that would be sort of like asamvedana, just basically being transparent or non-receptive. He says here about it, for mastery over sankalpa and vikalpa, practice asamvedana, non-receptivity to all desire. Instead of falling in love with your own desires as if they were fulfilling, you must instead begin to perceive them as burdens, like packages and parcels filled with unwanted items that really clutter your life and only weigh you down. So if you can come up with this idea of being free of these burdens, that's peace, contentment and peace. O Mother Supreme in human form, granter of boons and bliss, distress of our souls, removest thou, bringest us contentment and peace. See, that's how Swami Abhedananda would put it when he would sing that beautiful song. Prakritim paramam abhayam varadam nararupadaram janatapaharam sharanagata sevika toshakarim pranamami param jananim jagatam. So distress of our souls, removest thou. Bring us this contentment and peace. Shanti Sutam. So, and those are beautiful Sri Sharda Ashtakam, beautiful verses on his devotion to Holy Mother, whom he served as a child. Swami Abhedananda, that is, Sri Sharda Devi. Another wonderful facet of Sri Ramakrishna's Mahalila, great play. So packages filled with unwanted items and desires, like the story goes that you're on a train and you're dropped off at the station
at midnight or 1 in the morning, and nobody's there to pick you up, and you have all your baggage, and there are thieves out there in the thickets. You can't even go look for a phone booth, if you had one in those days, to call anyone, because if you leave all your items there, they'll get stolen while you're away. So you just have to sit there in the dark and guard your possessions. So that's not a very good mind state to be in. You should be able just to be free of all those things and wander freely as you will. Become a free soul, a sannyasin, as it were. And even if you're a householder and you have responsibilities, you still have to hold that state of mind, of this eternal freedom, and live in that daily. Because organizations and monasteries and all that, they have rust over them. You'll never get free by following the rules of organizations. That's the problem with Christianity, is that the church took the place of the guru, and now you have to follow the certain dogmas and credos of the church. But you'll never get free with those. It's personal self-effort, and that's what will free you. So you'll have to go your own way. And that's why Swamiji said, good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. He wants you to get those, check in with the teachers, get your initiation, and get yourself free after that. That's a threefold movement that people usually only accomplish 1 or 2 of those. The third one, they default and find themselves back in the sankalpic process later. All over again. So that chart is an easy study, but it's the quickest way to bring us to the idea of this mind-only school that's really going on by sankalpa and vikalpa. And those seeds in the mind also produce something that's, well, either healthy or unhealthy, or a combination thereof. That's called a samskara. So you've got these wonderful words in Sanskrit that if you look into, even just a single word, you could say guru or karma or moksha, or if you really want to work on yourself, sankalpa, vikalpa, and samskara, or samsara. You'll find all of these words are very pregnant with meaning, and just a word. It's the power that's in a word that you can unwrap it. So we say, like Sri Ramakrishna is our guru in this tradition, and he's the recent avatar of Kali. He's the Matri Bhakta, he's the Yuga avatar. So we say, if we think about him, what do we think about if we say his name? Mother Kali probably would come first, Mother Durga, Sri Sharda Devi, Swami Vivekananda, the 16 direct apostles, the Kali temple in Calcutta, the Yuga Dharma and the teachings he brought forth, his samadhis and non-duality. Shall I go on and on? I could go on for probably hours talking about everything that's in the name, the word Ramakrishna. In fact, Rama and Krishna are in the word Ramakrishna, and that could take us for another few hours of what that means. And how some of these great souls coming back every 1,000 years or every age, from age to age, to resurrect the new Dharma and displace the old Dharma where it's needed, are these souls that are also coming back, but they're coming back with certain seeds they water and the rest they won't. And so they're not into vikalpa and sankalpa. Their projections are very pure. And so if we put the mind of a great soul like that next to ours and then examine the seeds and the intentions and the desires and or lack thereof, then we'd see the difference between an ordinary soul and a supreme soul, or an illumined soul and a worldly soul. And then we'd see that the illumined soul has freedom, has peace, has bliss, has contentment, and has happiness, while ours, if we have it, is coming and going. And also, the illumined soul is free from projections and withdrawals and bondage, suffering, laziness, boredom. And ours is coming and going all the time, if not there most of the time. The illumined soul has knowledge of the 3 states of its own awareness. We have only knowledge of one state, waking.
We don't know what's in dream and what's in deep sleep unless a guide comes along and tells us. That's why we used to quote from Swami Sheshananda, who loved that song, "A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. And now all my dreams have become radiant meditations." So that describes very well the condition of a soul who got illumined by his teacher and then all of a sudden takes on the very torch and the very ambience of that teacher and now lives in this state of yogic insomnia. Very beautiful ways of saying it in these traditions. Let's go on before the break then, because this was a quick study, but it's an important word. Remember, it's sankalpa, vikalpa. Now add to our Sanskrit dictionary and understanding, or let's revive it, because we've probably seen it and heard it before, this teaching of on samskaras and samskara skandhas. As you can have a lifetime where you might have one predominant samskara. Let's say it's to be born again. You want to keep enjoying this kind of round. Because to a soul courting freedom, this is a matter of fear. See? Distaste. It's a matter of escaping. It's a potential bondage. But to many souls, this is what life is all about. So they have a samskara in their mind to be reborn again many times, even if they don't believe in rebirth. It's very ironic. They won't remember their last birth. It's only illumined souls like Krishna and the Gita who remembered their past births and told us about it. And yeah, okay, that was thousands of years ago. What about now? Dalai Lama and others coming before us and say, well, I've lived so many countless conscious lifetimes in this very century, in last century and so forth. So we're supposed to ignore them? These luminaries of the different religious traditions, many of them in India. Even Christ talked about the last lifetime of John the Baptist. So even in the Bible, before it was meddled with in 4th century, there were many teachings about reincarnation. I think most people generally believe in it. They just don't know the dynamics of it, and probably want to concentrate more on this lifetime than thinking about last lifetimes, because that would be living in the past, you see. But it's not living in the past when you go into meditation and check your past lifetimes. And it's not the personality that you're looking into. What you should be looking into is the thread that ran through the warp and woof of your consciousness through all your lifetimes, and whether you realized it or not. Because that realization of it would make you an illumined soul from lifetime to lifetime with pure samskaras. And we'll look at that when we look at the immortal Dharma here that I want to show you maybe at the second half. Here in this chart, though, before the break, there's this great saying in the Dhammapada by Lord Buddha. He says, "The discerning person straightens the mind, which is fickle, unsteady, and difficult to restrain, just as the skilled fletcher straightens the shaft of the arrow." It wasn't until I read the Dhammapada that I knew what my second grade teacher's name meant, Mrs. Fletcher. So I didn't know what a Fletcher was. And we had our own versions of her name, of course, as kids, but Fletcher means this, that workman who straightens arrows and used to sell these arrows to the armies of the kings and so forth. So that was well known in those times. So you've got this crooked piece of wood and you just sand it off. So you carve it off with a knife and then sand it so that it's straight. It used to be crooked, so your mind is like crooked, it's not thinking right. It's not itself anymore. In fact, it doesn't know that it's got all these powers, and it suffers because not knowing its powers. Sometimes it suffers by knowing its powers too, in the wrong way. So it's a very razor's edge path, as they say. Utitasta jagrata prapya vroni bodhata. Arise awake, stop not till the goal is reached. Because why? Because sharp as a razor's edge is the spiritual path and difficult to navigate. Who says that? The seers, who have navigated it.
So straightening out that arrow of the mind is your business. If you can straighten that out of all of these problems based on knowing that the mind is the culprit or the victim or the liberator, then you have a chance of living a realized lifetime. Your first conscious lifetime, followed by your first conscious, so-called, death. You'll find out that death is an illusion and that you're an eternal soul. And then you'll have to go back and look at these non-dual axioms again to find out that God does not cause death, that the soul never dies because it was never born, and that these series of lifetimes are a projection, a sort of dream fantasy and so forth, going on in the mind all the time. In fact, going on in the mind of millions of people, several millions of those are your ancestors. That's a hard grain to go against. People come back with the impetus of their ancestors and families. But to see, did I read that in that chart? Let's go back for a second and read that in this context. Sri Krishna called the world aniccham asukham, joyless and transient. Lord Buddha determined that the world was full of suffering. Jesus stated that the world was like shifting sands and that no man should never ever lay his head there. Sri Ramakrishna compared the world to a hole in the ground and ignorant living beings like vipers therein. Considering testaments like this from such luminaries, should the world not be given up post haste? But if you looked back, you'd see that you have to give up the world as a world separate from Brahman. If you see the world as Brahman, then there's nothing to give up. Brahman is all there is. So there are some very subtle truths, underlying truths, that you'll have to entertain and meditate upon. And there's also some very subtle moves that you'll have to make to work with your mind and your ego complex. The body-mind mechanism, the psychophysical being. These are things you're going to have to, in some ways, even trick your mind. Because the name of that chart was what? Beholding the truth through the maze of mundane human convention. The maze of mundane human convention. It's a maze out there. And it's amazing that people ever got out of it in the first place. It's so thick. So in that context, we go back and re-utter that chant or that sloka. Now, samskaras, you can see here this design I used for bubbles in the mind, as it were, these samskaras. You can see there that the black dots are negative samskaras. The ones with minuses are neutral, and the ones with eyes or dotted eyes are positive. So you can see that the mind holds within it all these different samskaras. Remember, you have to connect memory from past lifetimes to this to really make it full and rich as a teaching. Because you can't, you'll find out as you raise children or if you watch society over time that there are people doing things that are random, seemingly random, that you can't trace effect back to the cause in most cases. People can't even themselves trace the effects of what's happening to them back to their causes. Mostly this is because the causes are in previous lifetimes. That's called prarabdha karma. That's called sanchita karma. Prarabdha karma is what you bring forward from the past karma that you're suffering or enjoying or observing and transcending here in this lifetime. Sanchita, prarabdha, that will turn into your gami karma, what's in the future for you. So the teachings of the three karmas and samskara go together. I had a long exchange with some students last week about the connection and similarity between samskaras and karma. Those two are linked together. You do an act, it forms something in your mind. Then you repeat that act, and it creates a complex and then you die with that complex, you come back with that complex and repeat the old thing again. So it's doctor, 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 lawyer, 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 priest, 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 priest. So those things that are lodged in your mind are the tendencies which fructify later in your next lifetime, make you who you are, what you are, how you think. And that's a part of the maze of mundane human convention. The free soul wants free of those. And those are called in Buddhism, as we just quoted Lord Buddha, conditionings, nidanas. So a very similar teaching between the links or nidanas in Buddhism and the samskaras of Hinduism, which are shared in those traditions. So let's just take a gander at a few of these. Well, first, before we do, let's show some facts about samskaras so we understand them better. They are formed due to egoic, desire-based actions in past lifetimes. You know the metaphors or analogies we use. You cut your arm. There's some children doing that nowadays. They just cut themselves, you know. Feel the pain. Maybe it has this problem of cutting themselves, but actually you cut and it heals, you cut again, it heals, you cut and it heals, and it creates a scar tissue, they call it. Well, that's the same thing that's happening in the mind. It has scar tissue, subtle scar tissue, and consciousness can't move through that. It actually causes a grunty or a knot or a block that consciousness then can't move through the nadis in meditation or in dream, effectively, or in realization. Things get stymied because of these veils inside of your mind. So that's due to these continually doing a negative action and the effect it stores up in the mind. People think they can do negative things and get away with it, but that's not the case at all. It's stored up as a memory in your conscience and so forth in your mind. No matter what kind of devil-may-care cavalier attitude you might take about it, it comes back on you. What goes around comes around. So then one becomes very careful of the acts they do in each lifetime. When they're aware of the seeds, when they're aware of sankalpa, when they're aware of these samskaras that are being formed. Well, these samskaras lie dormant, unnoticed, and are hard to detect and neutralize. Samskaras should be subjected to sadhana. That is, this is where self-effort comes forth, going to church, following an organization, and so forth. It's not going to get very deep. You'll just become a member, a follower, a sheep who still has some scars for being a sheep next lifetime. Bah humbug, I say. So you want to become free of that kind of thinking. These samskaras operate in tandem with time, karma, and life's occurrences. That's where you bring together these nidanas of Buddhism, these links, 12 of them actually. A lot of it is conditioning. You think because of what you did before, and then that becomes what you drive deeper in your mind this time. So you're born in the next lifetime doing the same thing, maybe worse, maybe more committed to mixed truth. And there's a samskara in here like that. And other things like diseases and illnesses and things that happen to you that we just looked at that aren't God's responsibility also begin to occur to you via the samskaras of your own mind. So if you were to examine samskaras, you'd start to free God from responsibility. You start to free yourself from the erroneous idea of there's an incarnate devil somewhere out to get you. You'd free yourself from all sorts of mundane human conventions that people are thinking in terms of, when their very soul is freedom. They influence present life behavior for better or for worse. We'll look at the better later, so don't get too pessimistic yet. They can congeal into deeper complexes if not dissolved. A few months ago I gave you that chart that had the bucket of rusty nails on it. See? some nails in a bucket, got some rain, sat there for months, and finally turned rusty and cohesed together into this solid lump of rusty iron. Very hard to take apart. We were using that as an example of the corrosion of human consciousness, we called it. That these samskaras not only were there individually, but they turned into a skandha. That many of them got together and cohesed with each other. Then you've got a problem. Politician, 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 politician. They can only be removed by mental, spiritual purification. Mind-only school, understand that, do your work, release yourself from the seeds of your mind, burn them so they won't germinate anymore, keep the ones that are beneficial for you. That's discrimination, viveka. And then you'll live lifetimes of more and more light until finally you won't have to come back again if you don't want to. You're not dragged from birth to death and death to birth. So mental and spiritual purification is the way, not the grace of a savior and not hope. Determination, will. Those are two words that my teacher used a lot. Will and determination are very important. These samskaras often remain in residual form until samadhi occurs. So if you get a higher experience of consciousness, those will begin to burn away these samskaras. It would be like emptying the water out of that bucket of rusty nails and putting acid in there. Watch that rust burn away and everything come apart. You see. So you need that experience of oneness, samadhi, and everything that leads up to it. Remember, there are seated samadhis too. It would be good to look at that at some point, or look back on my teachings that are on charts of the sampragata states of consciousness of the father of yoga talked about, seated samadhis. So again, here we have again this idea of negative seeds and mixed seeds and then positive seeds. Well, like I said, the second half we'll look at some of the positive seeds. They cause the soul's transmigration in continual cycles. So we're going back and forth here between positive and negative and mixed things that are really a reading of the nature of samskaras and how to find them and deal with them and be free of them. Don't let them develop into samskara skandhas. And they dictate all the details of the next life's manifestations. These are some facts about some samskaras. Samskaras run deeper than others. So if a camel eats thorny bushes, Ramakrishna say, then it develops a desire for thorny bushes. So it's born again in the next lifetime with camels as parents, so it can get more thorny bushes. If you look at this, it's really the reason why everything gets attached to something and then dies attached to it, if it does, and then comes back to enjoy more of it. It would be whether it's a drug addict or a camel or a politician or a spiritual aspirant. They all have something that they adhered to in their mind for many years, maybe for lifetimes, and then they're bringing that back and using that as either a staircase toward freedom or an excuse for complacency or abasement for more bondage. So it's all up to the soul, and the mind-only schools declare that. So this will dictate the details of your next life's manifestation. So samskaras so involved in the process, sankalpa, samskaras, karma, back around to the loop. This is one way of looking at India's darshana and coming clear about what's going on beyond the maze of mundane human convention, the truth of the matter. Of course, this would be the relative truth, but it's like getting the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Path, or the Eight Limbs of Yoga, or any set of 8 or 6. It will elucidate the matter for you, and it will clear the mind. samyak darshana. Buddha said you must have this perfect view. Of course, we gave you the non-dual view. That might be a jump to the top step for a lot of people. But what's in between here in this teaching is a lot of dynamics about intermediate steps that can help you get free. I would say that if you could just start thinking about the non-dual truth, that will really give you impetus to make the changes you need to make in your thinking process in order to graduate into higher consciousness and be free of these problems that are plaguing you. Even just to think these things is important. I think we probably have come to the end of our time. Let's start off the second half with a little more detail about this, and then I'll show you some of these beautiful seeds in the mind that the seers will water if they want to come back and take birth here in this old waddled, as my teacher used to say, this Bur Loka. So here, let's pause for 15 minutes. Thank you for your kind attentions. we have all returned, all 24 of us or so, unless some great stream has opened up and everyone's listening to the Dharma all of a sudden. But we meet here once a week to do this almost all year, except for a few very rare breaks. And we broadcast from our ashrams in Oregon and in San Francisco too, on weekends when we're away, all to bring this eternal Dharma of India called Sanatana Dharma into the reach and the hearing of people so that they can work it into their lifetimes and redeem all of these negativities that are plaguing them and neutralize their karmas and, I'd say, live a dharmic life or divine life, or no life at all is even very high. That is, never come into the body again is actually a very high station that seers entertain and reach and prefer. So eternal life, that would be called, as compared to these other lives, dharmic and divine. A life of spiritual practice would be a very good life. A life of worldliness and so forth would not be so high. And then, of course, a life of detrimental actions and harm and violence to others would be the worst, fraught with karmas. And then those karmas turning into samskaras, and those samskaras operating the sankalpic process, and those sankalpic process becoming seeds in your mind that are getting watered every lifetime by these ill-considered actions and thoughts. Sri Ramakrishna once made an interesting comment when he said the negative thoughts of beings in this particular age are not going to be detrimental to them. So there were ages when, even if you, probably when you were more aware of your mind's powers, that if you thought in a certain way, you'd become aware right away that this was creating bad situations for you and others. But in this age, people's thoughts are so random and their consciousness is so veiled by Maya that their negative thoughts aren't going to hurt people, as might hurt themselves more than it hurts other people, as they say. But if you put them into action, then your thoughts, these negative thoughts, will become very detrimental. So there is a sort of thing about this particular age which you can try and control the mind, but make sure that these thoughts do not manifest into your actions. I teach sometimes in prisons and correctional institutions and so forth, and have students that write me from those places after giving a series of classes over 10 or 15 years. And so, of course, those are examples of, quite often, of people whose thoughts turned into actions that turned the life sour, for a time at least. Sometimes you see people come back from this and bounce back and understand these teachings because of these lessons they learn. So that was one of Holy Mother's great teachings. She said, in fact, one of her shocks in life was, they ask her, what's like, they ask Shankara this and they ask others this, what's the hardest thing to understand? And she said that, that people won't learn from their lessons, from their harsh lessons. That's how she couldn't understand why people wouldn't recover from these karmas and quit doing the actions that created these karmas. Well, that particular thing can go very deep, not just in this lifetime where you become a moral, ethical person and go to heaven kind of idea, but that you can actually neutralize your karmas so deeply that you can become free, a free soul, which is what you are in your essence anyway. And of course, those are teachings of Advaita, that the soul is pure and perfect. And as Swami Vivekananda said, it's a worse sin to call another a sinner. So you have to bring out the perfection of people, their innate perfection, appeal to that. So Dharma teachings do that for us, and even, and maybe especially if they're sobering, like some of these teachings of India and Buddhism are. So let's look quickly at this circle, because we want to know what a samskara skanda is. Horrors. Samskara, we know what that is because we've just read these entries here, but let's look around this. For instance, the black one there connects to is vain and attached to surface beauty. That would be a negative samskara. The next one is a positive. Practiced religion in a past existence and has potential for spiritual awakening. This, along with the Advaitic teachings we had in the maze of mundane human convention chart, we can put something like that together with it and realize that there are souls who come back to earth with a desire to be free, whereas others don't have that desire. Or maybe some have a hope for it and never get around to it, but others actually practice what's needed to attain it. So we see there are different levels of consciousness around this due to their samskaras. Here's a neutral one, or a mixed one. Due to suffering in past lives, has developed some power of forbearance. So that's where suffering becomes more important than pleasure. Pain is a greater teacher than pleasure. Sri Krishna you'll hear him speak that out in the Gita to his devotee Arjuna. And he says, what's sweet in the beginning turns sour later. You don't want that. What's sour in the beginning turns sweet later. You should go for that. So this means those things which are hard, which you can attain victory over via your own self-effort, those will turn sweet later. They'll give you strength, they'll build your character. We all should know about that, the benefits of that. So that person has a samskara that's potentially positive. The next one is, I'm going through these quickly. There's a negative one there. Tendency towards addiction due to substance abuse in previous lives. When I put together this chart, which is all my own doing, to show what a samskara or what a human mind, a pumpkin seed, has in it, then that's what I thought about. Just looking at observing people today from the standpoint not only of my childhood and my schooling and my years as a symphonic cellist and a recording artist and a Dharma teacher and all of the things that I've done in this 68 years I've been in the body. I had to look at all sorts of peoples I met and all the spiritual practice I did in different religious traditions also came up. So I had to come up with a list of things like that. And of course, about the more unfortunate souls, you'll find that this substance abuse that they call nowadays is definitely causing a deep cut or a deep thorny bush, the camel's thorny bush that he eats in the mind of these souls, and they will have to deal with this when they come back. And there's no help for that except in themselves, if we take it to the task of non-dual teachings. That is, waiting for someone to come along and save you, we found out that doesn't really happen very often. If the saviors don't come back for 500 years or 1,000 years or maybe never, or if your family is also in the same position you're in and can't help you, and your friends are fair faces and false hearts, and you can't find an eternal companion, then there's no one really to pull you out of these things until you yourself, as they say, hit rock bottom and begin to face off with these negativities and neutralize them. With the power of your own self-will, there is a help along the way, and it's usually not a spiritual organization, it's a guru, it's a teacher who will bring these to your attention and help you neutralize them. But you'll have to do the work. I know, there's a rub on everything. Another negative right next to it there is, a negative samskara is attached to pleasure and pursuit of wealth. So pleasure for the sake of pleasure and wealth as the end-all and be-all of life is called a negative samskara. I mean, even in Christianity, Timothy has a lot of the disciple Timothy has a lot of these great teachings about that, when he was the one that said money is the root of all evil. And so you'll find that even in other traditions, that people give up all your wealth and follow me, then you can be free, but the rich man couldn't do it. So there are versions of that, not just in Christianity, and 2,000 years old, but there are versions of that in India many more millennia old. There's, right next to it is another, two others that aren't assigned to any specific moniker. One's genealogy and the other's personality. Those are equipped with just neutral signs. So your genealogy and your personality, that's going to be something you have to watch very carefully. And of course, we know from charts I've shown you, like the blank canvas chart, that you can write your own ticket as a soul once you're outside of the body and you're taking your next lifetime. You're pretty free outside of the body, even if you're not fully illumined. You have a lot wider view if you're aware. And so you can choose your parents and choose your vocation and choose the land of your birth and so forth. They say this about the soul. If the mind-only schools are true, then it must be that way, correct? It has a lot of power to do that choosing. So what seeds is it going to water, and what seeds is it going to avoid watering? This is very important inside of the realm of the mind. We're not talking enlightenment when we talk this way. We're talking relativity, we're talking suffering and pleasure, we're talking purification, sadhana, we're talking yoga rather than Vedanta. We're talking practice instead of enlightenment. So that's a very important element for us now, which makes us avoid pseudo-Advaitas or pseudo-non-dualists who are saying, oh, you're perfect, don't worry, you don't have to practice. That's a real mistake. You must practice hard and examine yourself deeply to make sure that these seeds aren't going to come back on you or kick back on you, these karmas, when you get out of the body or at the time of your death, things that you covered over. And so genealogy, personality, a lot of teachings could go about that. Here's another negative one. Born with physical problems that worsen as age sets in. Remember back here in this chart we looked at non-duality, God is not responsible for illnesses. God does not cause death. He's not going to, like I heard the other week, some young man say, oh, God gave my father cancer and wants him to die. And I just went, oh my gosh, look how far we've fallen in our thinking that young people would be taught something like that. That man didn't get cancer because of this. You see, born with physical problems that worsen as age sets in. That's not his own doing. Attached to what? His genealogy. And his personality is going to dictate how he deals with that. So these are all things that are connected, and you don't just jump to some sort of vague understanding and try and blame it on God or devil, like religion sometimes does. Fundamentalist religion, even dualistic religion doesn't understand these. You'll have to go beyond organizations and churches and through your own self-effort and the aid of a teacher, understand these things and free yourself. That's always been the rule of thumb about free souls, enlightened souls, jivan muktas, bodhisattvas, however you'd like to call them. Here's a very positive one. You're saying, oh, thanks. Is kind and generous. That's, of course, a very good quality to have. You think of the four parikarmas. See how you should be kind and generous to people and indifferent to the evil and helpful to the suffering. And the 4 ways in which you should treat the 4 different kinds of beings. Well, that's right there. If you're kind and generous, then that's, of course, a good thing all around for everyone. There's another, we're going around the circle here real quickly. There's another little negative seed or samskara in your mind is, in the mind of some beings drowned in a past life, so it is afraid of water. I had to put that in. Or burned in the last life, so scared of fire, or caught in a landslide in a past lifetime, so it's afraid of earth. Whatever the case may be, the physical elements also have to be figured into our ruminations, our meditations on these truths, these relative truths. Because from mind, out from mind, then in intellect and thoughts came the five senses, and the five senses gave rise to the five elements, and the five elements formed objects. So it's from the mind out again in evolution type of style that all of this is happening, and it's going to march back in, and your soul is going to be moving along this march, inward and outward, maybe for lifetimes. When you detach yourself from those movements is when you're free, and that will be when you get over your desire for projecting things and enjoying things. And you can just take them as they come. Even the monks sometimes say that. We were talking about that at the break. Shankara sings his beautiful song when he sings, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Mudamate, Samprapte Sanihite Kali, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karane. In one of his verses of the beautiful Bhaja Govindam, he talks about that. He says, be satisfied with what comes to you just by your daily efforts. Whatever comes to you or doesn't come to you, be satisfied with that. And so he's not looking to gain more, and he's not afraid of not getting enough. Ramakrishna used to tell a story about that. There were two stepdaughters. The stepmother would dole out just one bowl full of rice to her each. That's what they got each day. No more, no less. So one day she was trying to serve them their meal, and she dropped the bowl and it broke. So each, in their minds of each of them said, now we're going to get more. See, that's the mind, it wants to get more. But she turned to him and said, I still have my hand, I can measure with that. So beings get exactly what they deserve in every way at all times, dictated by the law of their own karma. And they may think they're getting more, and that may be a misnomer and lead to their downfall. And they may be satisfied with getting less, and that might lead to their detachment and renunciation and lead to their enlightenment. So these things need to be thought and forborne. Remember this samskara over there, suffered in a past lifetime, therefore develop some power of forbearance. Whatever I don't get, whatever I get, it's all in your hands, Mother. And if you don't have a bowl, you still have your hands. There's a sort of an even samskara there. This person is humble, but also insecure. You have to be forthright, forthcoming. You have to be a little bit assertive in your attentions from the Guru and from the scriptures and from the illumined souls. You have to be a little bit forthcoming and put yourself in their face, as they say nowadays. See, so make them pay attention to you and answer your questions. But nahi ginena sadrishyam pavitramiha vidyate and tat svayam samsiddha and so forth. All of these teachings out of the Gita mean that tad vidhi pranipatena paripashyena sevaya upadekshanti te jnana jnaninas tattva darshanaha. Beautiful teachings from the Gita means that you probably should be serving these great souls and bowing before them, and then ask them the questions after you've buttered them up a little, you see. And they'll be more forthcoming with the answers. So you have to come with humility. So this person is humble, but at the same time has this problem of being sort of insecure and not aggressive enough, see. Here's one that's negative. Habit of laziness so is unable to mature. Complacency and laziness, what's the word for that in our tradition? Tamas. Darkness. Complacency, laziness, slothfulness, heedlessness. We go on with different words in English about it. That's definitely a very hard row to hoe. Not a good seed to have in you. There's one that's very positive, has potential for intellectual acumen. All the seers like to see the intellect come forward. That's Mother's intellect there. It's her intelligence, and when it appears in a human being, they perk up. So this person can learn quickly if they have that intellectual acumen. And the final one there, negative, is forgetful due to lack of study in a previous life. Well, that's very connected with that intellectual acumen. It's either there or when it's not. And when it's there, there's room for growth along the spiritual path. And when it's not, it's almost like saying habit of slothfulness. Did not study in a previous lifetime. There's a song in India which says that. Our founder, Lex Hickson, used to quote it. Everyone knows that any young child who does not do their studies is spanked soundly and put to bed without supper. Go to bed. So he didn't do his studies. So that's true in East and West, I think. Problem being here that in the West it's all just secular studies, and in the East they want you to do your spiritual studies. They should anyway. Hold up that torch of renunciation. My teacher used to say, I left India in 1947 and I never went back all my life. So I know that India has now made a lot of advancement. Now they have television. Everyone laughed. He says, but we don't want television, we want God vision. So I must say to India that we must hold up the torch of renunciation all the time, if India is to be India. We pretty much looked through that, but now that you've seen this, let's look at this samskara skandha real quickly. Here's some bullet points about what a bucket of rusty nails is like. If you get a bunch of these samskaras fused together and they become like conditionings for your life that are drag you from birth to death and death to birth, then here's some of the dynamics of a samskara skandha, which means a conglomerate of these ways of, combination of these negative and mixed things that get in the way. Consists of conventional beliefs. We just had that chart on looking through the maze of conventional religion and mundane human convention. Also, parental and gender issues. That's a big one, and probably undeniable that most people look into that these samskaras are coming out of family issues. Tendency to brood and worry. Of course, that's one that myself personally has attacked in most of my students. Let's not brood about this. Let's do some positive effort to better things. Brooding is the worst waste of time for all involved. So sometimes I used to say that to people and it would actually change them on the spot. Brooding is the worst waste of time. They had a habit of brooding, and actually out of the Guru's lip came, brooding is the worst waste of time. And they, all of a sudden they were giving it up. Okay, I won't do that anymore. Someone had to say it with some sort of force in order for it to give them permission to do it. So if you can't find the mind brooding, move it away from that. Unless it's with a capital B. There's some good brooding that you can do if you sit, and it's called contemplation or rumination. Who knows what the cow thinks of when it chews its cud? So basically you might be thinking of all these things in your life. It might be a good reflection to do that, and you can extract something beneficial out of that process and use it as impetus. So that would be a better kind of brooding. But you know the kind of brooding I'm speaking of here that people get into. Attached to worry, for instance. When none of these things that they're worrying or brooding about will ever happen, most likely. You look back 5 or 10 years at one of your fears, oh, it never happened. So all that time I spent fearing something was a waste of time. Another element of the samskara skandha is inability to love or be loved. That would be on that emotional level, but not just emotional, has to be devotional too. So people think God doesn't love me, or probably true that they don't love God the way they should, or it would be reciprocal. But on the emotional level, unrequited love and problems with relationships, all of that plays into a samskara skandha on that emotional level with no good effect. Also fear, and I put here especially of death. Now death, you might think, would be one of the things the mind would brood about, But that usually doesn't happen until old age. We'll sing that Shankara Stotram again and let you hear that. Basically, people don't think about realistic things like that. Swami Vivekananda used to say, in India we were taught to meditate on death and actually practice dying while we sat here in meditation. My ego is now dying, I'm gone. And gee, I think death doesn't exist because now my ego's gone and I feel great. It's like deep sleep, only with consciousness attached. So, but you said in the West you're told never to think about it. So that's a mistake. And depending on what form that takes. I mean, if you're already over your fear of death, then of course you won't think about it. You'll just think about eternal life. Otherwise, it could be a great problem. Finally, you have animalistic tendencies. The teaching in Tantra, and I gave the chart here in this room 3 or 4 months ago. It had the 3 kinds of beings, pasu, and then virya, and then daiva. Tantra says there are 3 kinds of devotees. The animalistic, they still have some desires to go on. So they're a mixed samskara type of bag, right? They will have some negative samskaras they bring back into the sankalpic process. That's their animalism. And so, in fact, a lot of animals have come out of that. Because people are violent, tigers are born. And other vicious animals. So they have anger, and they have violence, and they have meat eating, and they have various things in them. And that's a samskara in them. So in the sankalpic process, that'll work its way out. So it's the human that's animalistic, and then the animals come out of that. It's not the other way around, as non-dual philosophy just told us. So these tendencies come from pasu, animalism, even in a devotee. That is a person who loves God. Maybe a heaven-seeking person, for instance, who believes in God, but doesn't have the faith yet that God exists. What to speak of the knowledge that I and my Father are one? 3 different levels. So then there is virya. After pasu, the quality of the soul that gets born is virya. They're heroic. They're looking around saying, what can I do for you? Like my friend came over yesterday and helped me dig some big post holes for my garden. That's a virya act. He wants to come over and, can I pay you for that? No, I don't accept money from my friends, he said. So that's out for the good of all beings, kind of a loka sangraha type of feeling. And then there's, of course, daiva. These beings are divine. Pasu means animalistic, virya means heroic, and daiva means divine. So these 3 classes of beings you'll notice. I would say that you could put them on the level of the devotees. You could also go to the worldly and put them there too. There are worldly people who are animalistic, and that's some of the gross kinds of beings you see. And then there are worldly people who are heroic. And then there are worldly people also who are rather divine in some ways, moral and so forth. So it's a great teaching from Tantra. But you can see here some of the combinations in a mind. These are seeds. This is a pumpkin head, or a watermelon head. It's got these seeds in it that gets watered by samskaras, and the karmas that come out of it form it, and then it enters into sankalpa with that kind of mind and suffers accordingly. That is, suffers and enjoys accordingly. But if the seeds are purified, that is, freed of their power to germinate, especially the negative and the mixed ones, then the lifetime is going to be smooth. Sri Aurobindo called that lifetimes of greater and greater light, intensity of light. Till finally you've lived your last lifetime. Holy Mother used to say that. You should know about the soul who has no more desires, that that's their last lifetime. And that she was saying that in a very positive, good way. Now, we've gone through most of this chart. Maybe we can take up the final quote here by Sri Ramakrishna, because it demonstrates some of this The son of a king was fond of playing with his royal playmates. So you got this little boy who's a young prince. One day, as they were playing swords, the prince suddenly said, "I want to play a new game. I'll lay down, and all of you must beat me over the back with these cloths and robes," making a swishing sound as you do so, unquote. So the young prince all of a sudden gave up his swords and wanted to be hit over the back with some robes and cloths that were laying around. And then Sri Ramakrishna goes on to explain, you see, in his last lifetime, the prince had been the son of a washerman. That's how the washerman would clean absence of a rock in a river, would get these wet and beat them over the back of this boy, not to hurt him, but to wash out the dirt. So that was his samskara. He remembered this. Many of these things are, of course, possible and obvious in life. People are going through vocations of all sorts of strange things they're going through, and they're going through them repetitively. So even if he had a good samskara, this young washerman's son, he had some good samskaras, came to the fore in that lifetime, then he was born as a prince. You see, this is better, but he still holds the samskaras for being a washerman's son. So which of them got watered and which of them will get watered in the future? More importantly, which of them can you neutralize in this lifetime so that they will never germinate again? And this is the secret to the mind-only schools, to predicate a life that's based in God realization, at least in sadhana and practice. The desire for freedom. These are entirely higher samskaras. So let's look at those. And call that quits on this. There's an accompanying chart to this, you remember. This is the makeup of a samskara, and then there's another chart about samskaras themselves that we've looked at before. I decided to take this one up. So let's look here at a person who has some very powerful seeds, you might say, going for them. And this is called the 32 points of the immortal Dharma, and you will find this in the Bhagavad Gita. I took it word for word out of the Bhagavad Gita and put it in a collection, and then created this chart around it so you could see them each on their own in both Sanskrit and English. So let's go through these. He says, there you see a beautiful image of Vishnu with the four-faced Brahma on his right and Lord Shiva on his left. That's the Trinity again. That's the great mind. That's the Mahat. That's AUM of Om. That's all the powerful mind, the cosmic mind we call it, the great mind, or something. The Mahat just means the great. So if you were living a life of in causal worlds where these three were operating, then it would be a very blissful existence indeed. And your form would be very, very subtle, in fact, causal. And that is also all within you. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva within you. Remember, the non-dual teaching around that was the Trinity exists within you, along with all the gods and goddesses, angels, celestials, so forth. Human beings are walking around saying, oh, maybe you're in me and I'm in you. Let's be one. The truth of the matter is they are already. Maybe you have to exert a little effort in order to prove that self to you, to become one with your father, to become one with your neighbor, to become one with your loved one. But the truth is that's because it's already there. That's a homogeneous state of your consciousness, is oneness, or non-two-ness, non-manyness. So all of those things come clear to a person who has dharmic traits. And here you see some of these beautiful dharmic traits that Krishna is uttering forth to Arjuna at the end of this whole discourse of 18 chapters on the field of Kurukshetra, in the Bhagavad Gita, inside the Mahabharata, in the epic Indian Sanatana Dharma, all in. Talk about seeds, precious ones. So basically you'll see here from the beginning, just moving down, Advaita, he says, do not hate anyone. Maitraha, be friendly to all. We just had that as one of these samskaras. Friendly and compassionate to all beings. Aniketaha, unattached to location. Swami Vivekananda used to say, have thou no home, what home can hold thee friend? The sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, and food what chance may bring. Well cooked or ill, judge not, for no food or drink can taint the noble self that knows itself. Like rolling river free thou ever be. Say Om Tat Sat Om. So that's the idea, unattached to location. Have thou no home. As householders and fathers and mothers of children, you may have a home, a physical location, but have no attachment to it. Birds have nests, foxes have holes. You have no place to lay your head here. So it doesn't matter whether you go into Christianity 2,000 years in Jesus' words or 5,000 years ago to Sri Krishna's words. It's the same teaching. And it's also, I think, from the same soul, the same oversoul. So you should be able to take each one of these and think in your mind what I'm saying to you now in this room. You go home and you look at these and you think about them and you discourse to yourself about them. What does that mean? You can't just look at, I understand that. Or I'll wait for Babaji to speak next week on it. Or go back and look at the class again. You have to pull these apart and see what it really means. How about udasinnaha, unconcerned? Be happy with anything. He says later in the Gita, be content with anything that happens. Good, bad, mixed, negative. Wouldn't you be if you knew what's in people's minds? Wouldn't you be if you knew the process of sankalpa and vikalpa? And wouldn't you be if you had the non-dual truth given to you out in your lifetime and you had no doubt of it anymore? So this is carrying it full circle. Karunaha, we all know what that means. Basically, compassion. Dakshaha, you must be expert. In Tantra, dakshana means qualified. So that's one of the 7 qualifications of a tantric adept, is to be dakshina. If they see intelligence in you, like I said earlier, a few minutes ago, then they'll perk up and show interest. So that's a great advantage you'll have in making swift progress to the goal if you've developed your intelligence. Dakshaha. How about nirmamo? No ego. Nir means, of course, made extinct. So mamakara, tantric again, means ego with ego. So much of what Krishna and Shiva and Lord Brahma will teach, and the Divine Mother too, is based in Tantra. Egolessness. Then mauni, silent. Mauni, silent. Gaudapada called it amanibhava. Amanibhava means I have no mind left. I have the bliss of having no mind. That's an interesting thing to think about. You think, well, bliss and happiness come about because I have a mind. But you're mistaking that higher mind for your ego. You're mistaking ego for God. So do away with that mind and all of a sudden have the bliss that's unparalleled, have the bliss that's uninterrupted, have the bliss that's unalloyed. Stiramatihi, steady-minded. That's valued by the saints. Suchihi, pure. And of course, if that applies to the mind, then you've pretty much attained the final attainment in spiritual life, is to have a pure mind. Bhaktiman. You've heard of Batman, and you've heard of Atman. And, well, here's Bhaktiman coming with his cape of devotion. He's full of it, full of devotion. See? Gatayataha. Is that right? Gatayataha. That is untroubled, unconcerned. Like I said, be happy with anything that happens. Don't react, the father of yoga would say. Gatayataha. Me priyaha naraha. That means you'll become dear to God. That's also one of the 4 great teachings in Tantra, that you become samipya, they call it, dear to God. Then sarupya, you get the form of God. You're actually the form of God. And then sayujya, you get enlightenment. And salokya was the 4th, means you're born in the same space as God. You're in the same loka as God. Those are 4 great teachings in Tantra, much like this. Me priyaha naraha, dear to God, reminds me of samipya. Then samtushtaha, content. It's better than happiness. It may be not quite as good as peace, or the peace that passes all understanding, but contentment is a fine level to reach, especially with the mind. Yatatma, self-controlled. As we were just saying, you want not just control of the prana, the breath, but you want control of the senses more, and then you want control of the self, ego, more than that. And this will all lead to self-realization. Anapekshaha, desireless. Wouldn't it be the case if you know that desire is in the roots of seeds that cause sankalpas, that cause samskaras, that cause karmas, that cause more sankalpas? You see how it comes around and goes around in cycles. And samsara, all S words. Satatam, steady in meditation. So read our next forthcoming nectar, all of our meditation articles from different religions, and all these beautiful ways of people are engaging in meditation and the reasons for that. Sometimes for no reason whatsoever, just to sit and meditate. Driha nishchayaha, be firmly resolved in your path with your teacher, with your mantra, and follow it through to its ultimate goal. Harsha amarsha bhaya udvegai muktihi. It's a nice long phrase. He says, completely free of joy, envy, fear, and anxiety. Oh, wait a minute, joy? Everyone's thinking, I must be free of joy? Yes, because joy is followed by sorrow. So that, go back a little bit. What's he say? Content. What's he say? Even-minded, steady-minded. A joyous person often loses themselves in joy, and maybe sometimes for the wrong reasons. Oh, let's just say I won the lottery. See? I'm all of a sudden full of joy. All my problems are over, when really all your problems are just beginning, because money is the root of all evil. Evils that you haven't even seen yet until you start using it, which creates sanskaras for wealth. And do I have to connect all the dots here? Back from the last 3 hours, or nearly that. Finally, na hrishyati, na avesti, na sochati, na kankshati. No. Na means neither rejoices, hates, grieves, or desires. Well, it's back to the sthiti pragnasya again, steady-mindedness. So even these joys and sufferings would be more helpful than that. So that's why sometimes we sing. Or Tulsidas sings, Etani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dandva hamara bitaoji. Etani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dandva hamara bitaoji. 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 Itani vinati raghunandana se. This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. Who is Raghunanda? The manifestation of Vishnu. Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality. What a nice prayer that is. What an unusual request. and remove all sorrows and sufferings arising in my being, not because of dualities. For Atman alone abides, none else exists. It is attachment to relativity that gives birth to the miseries of life. What is relativity? That's sankalpa, vikalpa. It's developing samskaras via karmas and developing more. It's plunging into samsara. It's being reborn again and again in ignorance of your true nature because you didn't renounce unreal things. I mean, basically what I just said in that long sentence was the combination of Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. Little Buddhism thrown in there. So all of these things, again, we need to connect them in order to realize the truth of them. Let's go down the right-hand column. Sangha vivarjitaha, free of all attachment. Tulya minda stutir, is the same in censure and praise. That's a hard one to attain. If you're into the world and you want success and so forth, so basically you want to have this freedom from all attachment that will give you freedom, the ability to act the same in censure and praise. Probably not just act, but actually feel that way. Oh well, you're praising me, you'll censure me tomorrow, or vice versa. It's what happens in the workplace. I've had students tell me that. That basically, they were really disliking me. All of a sudden they liked what I was doing. Now they they dislike everything I'm doing again. So back and forth that goes in the human mind. In groups. Tulya ninda stutir. Then samaha satrau cha mitre. Same to friend and foe. So he's getting into these appellations here that are more about how to deal with society and family and the world. Same to friend and foe. Then right there near his conch shell, mana apamanayaha. Same in honor and dishonor. So same to friend and foe, same in censure and praise, same in honor and dishonor. He's singing a song here of the Gita to Arjuna on the battlefield. Because Arjuna had some questions, didn't he? Well, I'm going to drop my sword and go away. And Krishna says, but all of your own army plus your teachers and the people on the other side of the army who also love you, even though they're on the other side of the army, they'll discount your dishonor. How will you feel then? So you can't run away from this work. You have to do it. So he must remain even, not evil. He must remain even in censure and praise. Otherwise it's an evil. Samtustaha yena kenachit. Content with anything. That's what I was mentioning earlier. Whatever happens or arises, you be content with it. If a baby is born or 400,000 people die in a tidal wave, you must be content with that. Why? Because Ramprasad says everyone's babbling about what happens after death. Some think we'll be a wandering spirit, a ghost. Others think that we'll come back again. And others think that we're like space in a jar, and when the jar is broken, space becomes one with space. But Ramprasad knows that all of these are just conjectures. We will be, in the end, what we were in the beginning, bubbles rising and dissolving in Mother's boundless ocean of consciousness. Isn't that beautiful? So let's go back and talk about brooding on death. See? There's Ramprasad's answer to it. We will be, in the end, what we were in the beginning, just bubbles rising and dissolving in Mother's boundless ocean of consciousness. So dissolve, as I started out chanting in this class, mano na buddhi na shariram na indriyam na tanmatram na bhuta panchakam, aham kritas chapi, aham, the ego. Dissolve everything, mind, intellect, ego, into that formless Brahman, like bubbles dissolving into water. And do that every day in the morning and every night before you go to sleep. Do it mentally,
because then it'll become an actuality for you. If you don't do it mentally, then everything unreal and untrue and that causes suffering will become a reality for you. You'll think evil, suffering, and so forth to be real. You'll think the world to be real when it's just a dream, a sankalpa that's going on continually in the minds of billions of beings. What else can we say then, after being content with anything? Mai arpita mano buddhihi. Have a devout mind and intellect. Dedicate your mind and intellect with the strength of your full being to getting God realization in this life. To hearing the truth so that the truth can set you free. To making thine eye single. And you must be dedicated 100% to that, or maybe more. Yashman no dvijate. These are some of my favorites here. Who does not afflict the world. And down lower, lokan no dvijate, whom the world cannot afflict. So that soul who is steady in praise and blame and in censure and so forth, he does not afflict the world, nor does he let the world afflict him or her. I love those two together. As earlier Sri Krishna said that in the Gita, those who know the Atman are not born at the time of creation, nor are they destroyed at the time of dissolution. It's a Zen koan. How is that possible? They were born, but they're not disturbed. So this is how to live in that yogic way that extracts the essence out of everything. Whether you're monastic or householder or forest dweller, worker, menial worker, warrior, doesn't matter who you are, what you are in that way. That's just the outer circumstances of things. If you're a man or a woman, Vivekananda used to tell the women disciples, that's just a manifestation of your birth and what you decided to be. But this is the truth here. So make sure that you're born in such a way that creation does not disturb you and destruction cannot disturb you. And so that will be this beautiful teaching of not afflicting the world. That means you must be nonviolent, and not letting the world afflict you. Must be like water off a duck's feathers, as they say. Just nothing can get in to bother you. Back to steadiness and contentment. And all these are connected with just different little ways of saying it. So here's another one. Samadukka sukha. Same in pleasure and pain. Sarva aramba parityagi. Renounced of all actions. Loko lokan no dvijate. Whom the world cannot afflict. We said that. Shubha ashubha parityagi. Renounced of good and evil. Well, Swami Vivekananda used to say that about, and my own version of that is, good and bad are chains that hold, one of iron, one of gold. Put it in that way. He'd then know more how body lives or goes. Those verses that he used to sing about. Say peace to all, and so forth. He's talking about good being a gold chain and evil being an iron chain, and they both bind you. So that's why you should be renounced of both. If you're seeking just the good, there's a certain misconception that you can escape evil by seeking just the good. You can definitely better things, but the two come together as a duality. And up here he just talked to you about dualities, how to get over them. So you have to be very careful of that and make it a more in that sense of even-mindedness beyond all dualities. Because in the Gita is where you'll hear him say, Dvandva mohena, Arjuna, you must be free of the pairs of opposites. Make sure you're free of the pairs of opposites. Good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, bondage and liberation. There are many dualities to consider. You must fall in the middle path between them, or you must transcend them.
It's actually two ways of doing it. Go beyond them both, sannyas and bold, say Om Tat Sat Home, or take the middle path up the middle like Sri Krishna does in his lifetimes. And I think that does it for those. And you just went through with me 32 points of the immortal Dharma listed in the Bhagavad Gita.
Just one more.
Is there one more?
Same in heat cold.
Oh, because it's been so cold lately here in Hawaii, we can't give that one up. Same in the heat and cold. I don't see it here.
It's at the very bottom, underneath renounced of good and evil.
Oh yes, samaha sita ushna sukha dukeshu. Same in heat and cold, pleasure and pain. It runs along that same teaching about the dualities. So we didn't want to do 31, thank you. We did all 32 of these beautiful facets or points in the diamond of the immortal Sanatana Dharma. And there's one quote here at the bottom where Krishna tells us about this. They who follow this immortal Dharma of mine, endued with Shraddha, that's faith, looking upon me as the supreme goal and devoted, they are exceedingly dear to me. So these 32 points of the immortal Dharma then will be considered for nomination into our dharmic life. These will help temper our samskaras and neutralize our karmas and give us maybe a detached witness consciousness around such things as samkalpa and vikalpa. So this whole class that we will end a few minutes early now has taken us through 4 charts, and we really covered a lot of ground today. I will not get into the Atmic Sankalpa and Vikalpa until Atmic Sankalpa and Mayik Sankalpa until next week, when we'll start out with this chart and look at some of the ways in which living beings project using Sankalpa in a most positive and beneficial way for others, and ways that are opposite of that, where people get themselves into so many karmic binds and negative samskaras that fructify in their lives instead. So here, let's end with a chant, and may all of these teachings be beneficial to us and enter into us. Om Bhadram Karnibhihi Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabirti Jatraha Sthirair Angayesh Tushtavam Sastanuvir Vishema Devahitam Yadayahu Svasti na Indra Vidashavaha Svasti na Pusha Vishvadevaha Svasti no Taksho Arishtanemihi Svasti no Brihaspatiir Dadatu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May we hear with these ears what is good and spiritual. May we see with these eyes what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and Mother of the universe with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.